Hey everyone, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website is theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I'm Dan, I'm here with Don, and we are very lucky to have Jay Chung on today. He's the CEO, the very popular CEO and founder of goBalto. Is it goBalto Inc. or just goBalto? How do you guys refer to
Just
yourself?
go Balto. Go Balto.
goBalto, just like the book cartoon, right?
Right. Well, the name was inspired after a Siberian Husky named Balto. He led his
Oh.
team on this anti-diphtheria run back in the 1920s from Anchorage to Nome. And we wanted to bring that same sort of passion and commitment conveyed in the company's namesake to bring medicines to people faster through the harshest conditions. So go
Wow.
Balto it is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're definitely gonna talk about goBalto and all that entails, and we're gonna talk about Jay. I've known Jay through social media before I even really figured out what social media was. We met on LinkedIn a while back, and he
That's
was
right.
very popular back then. goBalto was initially like a directory for research clinics and like research, I guess, service providers. So I
That's
signed
right.
up South Coast Clinical Trials through that, and then I followed you, Jay, primarily because of your LinkedIn reading list. So believe it or not, I've read a lot of the books that because they were on your list. Like I read
Oh,
Dune because
great.
of you.
Wow.
Yeah, one of my favorites was Dune, and I wouldn't have thought of reading that until I saw your recommendation. So
Wow.
Jay knows social media. That's my point, and he's been doing this for a while, and we're gonna talk to him about how he uses social media for goBalto, because they've got a very popular blog as well, and we're gonna talk about all that. But Jay, first and foremost, just kind of introduce yourself for some of our viewers who may not know who you are.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. It's really kind words. Yeah, so my name is Jay. I'm the founder and CEO of goBalto. goBalto is a web-based platform that enables CROs and sponsors to get their sites up and running. Prior to goBalto, I also co-founded a company called Celtrion, which is one of the world's largest biopharmaceutical suppliers,
Hmm.
and took that to an exit back in 2008, and literally retired for about a month before I came up with the idea of goBalto. And as Dan alluded to earlier, initially the concept was to set up a LinkedIn directory, if you will, to help sponsors find sites and CROs, but evolved into this platform that basically allows sponsors to get their sites up and running quicker.
Mm-hmm. Now,
So a little bit.
let's talk about your first company, the one that you had to exit. What was it exactly?
So it's a company called Celtrion. Founded that back in 2001, and at the time, we entered into a joint venture with a Genentech spinoff to build basically a purpose-built facility to supply AIDS vaccine. Now, at the time, in retrospect, I didn't quite realize how naive that decision was because obviously you don't bet the farm on a single product. And as we all know, there is no AIDS vaccine in the market.
Hmm.
So when we realized that it failed phase three pivotal trials back in '03, we pivoted to focus on contract manufacturing of biologics, primarily antigens and antibodies, which culminated into a number of contracts and relationships with Bristol Myers Squibb, Sanofi Aventis, and from there it basically took off. And more recently, they've been focusing on biosimilars, so Rituxan type of biogenerics and what you will. And now they are one of the largest facilities in the world to supply that market.
Wow.
I retired from the board back in '08, but I'm now just more than anything just a silent shareholder.
So you were the founder of that one as well.
Yeah, well, as a co-founder, it was me and two other
Co-founder, okay.
partners.
So what got you into this field, like in pharmaceutical? Just let's go back as far as we can here.
Yeah, so even prior to Celtrion, I was a strategy consultant at McKinsey, and at the time we were covering a lot of also the healthcare sector, and it was partners at the time that told me that there would be the shortfall in biologics manufacturing capacity. And if you look, I'm a really big fan of history and pattern recognition. And particularly, this was out in Asia. We saw that a lot of the high-tech industries like semiconductors, shipbuilding, car manufacturing went out to Asia. We thought the writing was on the wall, and eventually, particularly biomanufacturing as well, which up until then was non-existent, was the next big frontier. And that coincided with a lot of the Asian governments that were really trying to make a push into this sector. So we just thought that the stars aligned, that the timing was right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was me. I guess people would be surprised here. I'm also a trained CPA from another lifetime. That's a
Really?
couple of decades ago. But
So do you do the
yeah, you wouldn't want me to
bookkeeping?
balance your books. It's been a while since I did any formal accounting.
So you don't do the bookkeeping for goBalto?
I've got plenty of folks much smarter than me that are
You
making sure
don't.
that
You're not
we have enough
responsible
cash.
for counting the
No, don't want
millions.
me. No. And I don't think
Oh,
the VCs would probably like to hear that, but I got a lot of folks managing the financials.
okay. Well, so and your Celtrion, you managed to sell it. Is
Right,
that
we
public
listed it on
information?
the Kazakh. Yeah, we listed on the Kazakh, which is the Nasdaq equivalent. We listed for about $1 billion US, and it subsequently quintupled in value up to $5 billion. So the running joke is, if you ever want a company to increase their value, just get me on the board and let me retire, and eventually it'll increase in multiples. And but it's now the largest company on the Kazakh, publicly listed on the tech securities exchange market out there. So it's been a real fun ride. I mean, it was a bit topsy-turvy at some times, but in retrospect, I mean, I learned quite a bit through that experience.
You made out well. So you're a true entrepreneur, Jay. I need to borrow $20.
Hey, listen, we actually have a Super Bowl pool going right now. It's funny. People are kind of scrambling just to come up with $2 per square. So maybe I'll put you some.
Well, you got Cisco. That's my favorite team is the 49ers. I'm so pissed off they didn't make it. I'm not even going to watch it this year.
Well, I'm originally from New York.
I know.
So, yeah, the New York Giants winning. I wasn't very popular these past couple of weeks.
No, you weren't, man. You and another guy I follow on Twitter, big Giants fans. Yeah. So, anyways, I mean, you're a accomplished entrepreneur. I want to assume, without knowing the details of the Celtrion deal, that you could have easily just retired, right? And I mean, live financially comfortable the rest of your life. I'm assuming, right? But so, what made you want to get into goBalto?
It's one of those things where well, first of all, like all of us, and I could tell looking at you guys, I mean, you have a lot of energy, and life is a lot more than that, right? Obviously, yes, I did it quite well, but, part of it was, when you get an itch that you got to scratch, you want to scratch. And really, the genesis even for goBalto was, at the time, I was trying to help somebody find a regulatory consultant out in China. And, I thought through my networks and relationships, I could find somebody. And even when I was searching the internet, it was really hard to find that specialty. And I thought to myself, and I spoke to a lot of the investors here in Silicon Valley, I mean, why isn't there some sort of service that deals with this? And that was really the genesis behind even the directory. So it was one of those things where you saw there was a problem, there was a need, and since nobody else was really tackling it in a meaningful manner, you go out and fill the need. I mean, as you guys know, with even the service you provide, and I got to tell you, I give a lot of props to the transparency, the visibility you guys do in terms of service. I mean, it's one of those things that people didn't really understand clinical research in plain English terms. And wow, you guys came on the radar basically around the same time we started goBalto. And think about the following and the content and the amount of transparency you brought. It's about just filling a need that you realize was out there, and it's actually helping people. And really, to answer your question, it's the same reason why you guys are doing what you do.
Right. Good answer. I like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a good answer. So, take us through, or do you have any questions for Jay, Don?
No, you're doing fine. I mean, this is quite interesting.
Yeah, take us through, and we're gonna get into what goBalto does now.
Because I've got your website up here.
Yeah, and you gotta check out the blog too. But take us through the pivot. So you started out as a directory. This was, LinkedIn was around, but people weren't really on it.
Right. So if you think about it, like for instance, investigator databases, the way most sponsors manage them, they typically have their proprietary database. Sometimes it's plugged into their CTMS, or they have usually an Excel spreadsheet. And I thought to myself, this was at the time when Yelp was really coming in their prime, and obviously LinkedIn was taking off. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if there was just a real easily searchable database of not only in sites, but also CROs, contract manufacturers, everybody in the life sciences ecosystem, where you as somebody who had needs of a service can easily and quickly search through this directory to find folks that meet your requirements, right? Mm-hmm. And we launched this back in the spring of '09, and we got quite a bit of traction. But it was interesting. It's one of those things, as you're building up the service, you kind of hear whispers around a bigger pain point, particularly from the end users. So as I alluded to earlier, I want to probably just show you this. We did win this award. My wife hates this picture, by the way, because there's a little bit of a double chin here that you can't really notice. But as I was accepting this award over in Boston, I announced to the audience that we were actually pivoting off the directory. So I did get a few puzzled looks from the audience, but what we quickly realized from our user base was that study startup was quite cumbersome, right? So the way, when I refer to study startup, it's the whole exercise of identifying PIs and sites, getting them initiated, qualified. It's an enormous amount of paperwork. And most of the tracking, even by many of the global CROs today, are done primarily through Excel to get these sites initiated. And I thought, man, with all these amazing web-based platforms like Basecamp and now Box.net, where it connects multiple stakeholders around the world. You think about PI, sponsors, CROs, study teams, IRBs. If there could be a web-based platform that can enable everybody to collaborate and get sites initiated up and faster, it gets people, a lot of these folks away from just getting the cumbersome overhead of getting sites activated to the more important stuff of enrolling patients, right? Patient quality, safety. And that was really the premise behind the pivot. And we thought that, this was more worthy, at least in the interim, a pain point that people were really clamoring for a more automated solution. And that ultimately evolved into Tracker, which is what is out on the web today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're looking at it now. See Tracker in action. So, when did the VC money come in? Did they come in? Did they want you to pivot or?
So, yeah, just a little bit of background in terms of how the company evolved. Again, I was extremely lucky in my past endeavors. So up until the point of the pivot, that's experience in Valley. But as we started getting traction with Tracker, VCs, they always kind of smell an opportunity. And I'm also a mentor at this seed accelerator called Rock Health, based here in San Francisco. Rock Health is an accelerator that provides funding, networks, and backing for healthcare technology entrepreneurs. And I was tapped to actually be one of the mentors and advisors there. And as luck would have it, sometimes I was riding up the elevator at the launch party, and I was standing next to a tall gentleman who was a VC at the time. I didn't realize it, and we just struck up a conversation in terms of how the e-clinical landscape was evolving. And through there, as I realized that goBalto's track was taking off, he actually proposed maybe it makes sense to take some expansion financing to really make this grow and really make it into the potential it ultimately is turning out to be.
The game changer, yeah.
Yeah, they came on board last fall in October is when they announced the Series A financing. It's Aberdare Ventures is the fund. And they co-invested, syndicated with another fund called West Health Investment Fund based out of San Diego. And the interesting story about West Health Investment Fund, it's an evergreen fund, meaning they don't make any profit. All the profits are invested back into the fund. And it was founded by Gary and Mary West of West Telecom. And they basically set up this $100 million fund to reduce healthcare costs. And it's just basically giving back to America and, to the country and trying to figure out, how can you leverage and invest in technologies that would actually reduce overall healthcare costs? So, I feel like we're very lucky and blessed to be partnered with investors that actually are trying to make a difference above and beyond just simple ROI.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you guys, are you guys still players in that particular game as far as trying to reduce this cost? If so, how are you doing it?
Right. So, the hypothesis, the premise behind Tracker is right now there's a number of different levers. One is around just the cumbersome overhead. So you think about the amount of time it takes to collect documents, like for instance the 1572s, right? The CVs, the license, the contract, the budgeting. The platform enables sponsors and CROs to interface with sites and collect these documents in a much more meaningful and automated and organized manner. So there is just some manual overhead associated with tracking all of these assets that are streamlined through the web-based platform. The real value that I actually see in it is the data, right? So if you think about like how a lot of people characterize Web 3.0 as the era of data, and this is what Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn always says, is that the social networking game has been won, right? There are a handful of players, and we know about Facebook about to go IPO. Like the whole social dynamic of Web 20 is over and done with. The next wave of entrepreneurship and innovation on the web is going to be around data. So the real power I see in Tracker is because folks are starting and initiating and completing tasks through the platform, the system actually captures and date and timestamps all the activities. So for the first time, we can start benchmarking how long it takes for certain tasks to get completed. So if you go to any CRO today or a sponsor and you ask them, how long does study startup take you? More often than not, they'll either give you a quizzical look or they'll say, well, they'll throw out random months or time periods, like it takes 3 to 6 months for phase 2, maybe a year for phase 3. People don't really know, right? These are tracked, all the data is just buried in Excel spreadsheet CTMS system. Through Tracker, because it's a workflow solution where people are starting and completing tasks in terms of site initiation, and we're tracking all the durations, we can start repurposing and aggregating that data behind the scenes and showing sponsor stakeholders exactly how long it's taken to get your sites up and running. And that's the true power. Now, imagine by leveraging this data, data has to be actionable, right, at the end of the day. It's not good enough just to be out there. By identifying where the bottlenecks in real time are as you're getting sites up and rolling, you can start targeting those bottlenecks and get resolving them in a meaningful manner. So imagine if you're starting a phase 3 study with sites all over the world, and you realize in India certain sites are slow to enroll compared to Latin America, you can start honing in and allocating resources there to getting them up and running. So it's about bringing that level of automation and data and transparency to the end users so they can speed up site initiation.
So very much like the ECRF changed the speed of entering the data while the trial was going on, this is taking it one step further and being more proactive and actually helping the startup.
Bingo, right? That's exactly it. It's about getting away from reacting after you've got all the data, compiled the reports, to actually living in the moment. And as you're seeing the statistics and the metrics flow up on your dashboard, you can start acting on those metrics to actually improve the outcome on the trial that you're currently working on. I'll give you a great example. So we did this experiment with Shire and PRA. This is all public domain back in the fall. And the experiment called for trying to initiate 50 sites around the world in about a week, right? It's a pretty ambitious target, but we were really trying to put a stretch goal out there. Well, because we're tracking all the metrics in terms of how quickly sites are getting up and running, we actually repurposed the metrics to surface them on the site's dashboard. So not only do sponsors have a dashboard, but sites have their own dashboard to see where they are in the study start process. And we use these metrics to start ranking sites in terms of how quickly they're getting up and running. So one site turned out to be the lowest ranked site of the 50. And they asked the sponsor, they asked Shire, what's this ranking about? And they said, well, you're being ranked. You're seeing how responsive you are. They turned out to be the fastest site initiated. So it's those are the kind of interesting things you can do with these data metrics to introduce this concept of gamification to really appeal to their sense of, obviously, pride, their reputation, that they want to be the best. And it's just these kind of levers that we're observing that can be used to really boost performance in terms of site initiation. It's things that consumers and consumer startups have figured out a long time ago. It's just now the enterprise space as well as healthcare is finally catching on.
Now, what I'm hearing too, you guys are the ultimate time management program, because that's
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's about transparency, right? And as you guys are probably aware, not everybody wants things completely transparent, right? Particularly folks who don't perform quite well.
Right.
So, if the one thing the internet has taught us is that transparency is inevitable in many different facets, right? And healthcare is kind of one of the last bastions where a lot of the stuff is done behind the scenes. You kind of never really know how things are going. So, I anticipate, at least with the platform, for folks who do exceptionally well, they'll really gravitate toward it. But folks that are always kind of on the lower tier performance, we will expect some pushback in terms of trying to hide some of the data, right? And we've seen that in some of our early adopters as well, right? They don't want this, like CROs don't want the sponsors snooping around in the system.
So you're actually getting you're giving them more transparency between the sponsor and the CRO.
Yeah, it's for all stakeholders, right? So it really truly is a collaborative platform. So whether you're a sponsor, CRO, site, everybody basically can see their dashboard in terms of where they are in the process and who the laggards are and who the best performers are, right? If you're a great performer, you're gonna love it. If not, well, you can imagine what their reaction will be.
I definitely like this, but of course, I mean, your customer primarily are the CROs and the sponsors, right?
Yes,
Like
correct.
you don't care too much about the sites and what they think.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely. Actually, one of my premises originally when we started off was, and think about most solutions out there. You bring up a great point. They are always sponsor at the end of the day, sponsor / CRO centric, right? And the sites are always an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
We realized quickly, early on, that without the sites buying into the tech and to the processing approach, that this platform would be dead on arrival. Because if you can't get adoption from the sites and they're not getting value out of the system, then for the sponsors, it'll always be an uphill struggle to try to onboard these new sites and engage them in a meaningful manner. So, we've got a crackerjack team of user interaction experts, like, for instance, that lady, Lucy Richter, who you're going to be speaking to, a design reach from IDEO.
Okay.
Their task and responsibility is really to understand the motivation of not only sponsor CROs, but sites, which is why she wants to speak to you, to understand really what is it that you need out of a solution and really understand your processes so that our platform can really address the core needs of your day-to-day activity. So for us, the sites is not an afterthought. They're actually very much on our mind in terms of how to improve your user experience as well as giving you the value that you need to improve your daily life. It's really about just making your life simpler. So it's less an exercise and just trying to figure out what you guys are up to, but more around what are the problems and challenges you have and what can we do to make your life simpler.
Wow.
So in your analysis, before a tracker ever came out, who's responsible for slow, steady startup?
Everybody and nobody if you speak to all the stakeholders, right?
Okay.
It's one of those things where people, I'll give you a great story. When I went out initially meeting a lot of venture capitalists around goBalto and study startup, their first reaction is, Jay, study startup, is this really a problem? I mean, if you want to go for the buck, right, you got to go after CTMS, study conduct, patient enrollment. These are the big ticket items. Now, here's my take on that. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is trying to build their own secret recipe of CTMS, right? Whether it's Oracle, Face Forward, which got acquired by Oracle, and there are a number of players out there. The reality is, and this is my personal opinion, which I've on some occasion gotten slammed on LinkedIn, particularly by the CTMS groups, is the CTMS model is flawed. I mean, if you think about the way CTMS originally evolved, it was built upon a CRM database application, which was never purpose-built to track workflows and clinical trial data, right? So if you think about the way that even the entire industry evolved, it was off of these Oracle Siebel systems, which were reconfigured because they saw this opportunity in clinical research. So I actually wanted to go back to the basics, right? At the end of the day, every trial has to start somewhere. It has to start in study startup. So to the extent that you could set expectations that high in study startup and people can come away with an amazing user experience, and they set their bar and their expectations that high, our theory is that will cascade through the entire clinical value chain. So although we're starting in study startup, our intent is to broaden our scope and reach to actually tackle the entire clinical value chain, right? But to do that, you have to get study startup right. The other thing that we quickly realized as well is because people felt that the study conduct was the most important, they just acknowledged that Excel was the SOP, it's the status quo. So to your question around what is a bottleneck, well, the bottleneck is the status quo. People have just come to accept that Excel is the best tech out there, that we have to make do with these kludgy CTMS systems, and because these are all that are out there, well, what else have we got, right? So goBalto is less about our products and our platform. The platform is just a manifestation of what we represent of value. So you're very kind earlier in terms of us being popular and being well read. I think what's resonating with our audience is that we represent change, positive change. This notion that you don't have to accept the solutions or the processes of today, but that there is a way to be better, right? If I kind of take this even at a higher level, and what I'm observing in Silicon Valley is there's this tectonic shift that's underway in the entire enterprise landscape. So when you talk about companies like Box.net, 37 Signals, these folks represent a new trend in enterprise software where, the applications that you use at home with the iPhone apps, they can be translated into the workplace. There's no reason why they can't be in the workplace, right? And to the extent that we can bring those same values to the healthcare technology space, I mean, don't we deserve this? Don't our stakeholders deserve this? I mean, they're doing the most lofty of goals, which is what? improving healthcare, improving patients' lives, and they should have access to the best tech out there. It's just a shame that up until now you've had these legacy giants that have just gotten their annual cash flows, and people take it for granted. But I think that time is coming to it's coming to an end, and that's what goBalto represents. It represents a new way of listening to the end users and really providing them with the tools they need to improve their processes and ultimately get medicines to people who need fast. Ergo Balto, right? So Balto is very much has a lot of meaning to us when we selected the name.
Would you happen to know what type of money that the sponsors are spending on startup?
Right. So, I mean, again, it varies by phase 1, 2, or 3, right? So it depends on whether or not you're doing a larger study, a number of sites. I mean, for us, we've seen orders of magnitude that ranges. I mean, you guys know this better than me, right, in terms of the money that is out there, whether it's in the hundreds of thousands and sometimes upwards to the low millions. So there's a lot of waste being done there. But it's an interesting question, because you know what? I even struggle right now how much is waste, because nobody's actually tracked this metric to any degree of accuracy. So somebody who actually lives and breathes study startup is struggling to come to a precise answer, because those metrics aren't being accurately tracked globally. And that's what we're trying to change right now. Right? So check back in with me maybe a year from now, and I'll give you a more definitive answer.
It sounds like the industry had its head in the sand until you guys came around and say, hey, wait a minute, look what's going on here.
Yeah, I would never characterize ourselves as the most, as a smart, particularly myself. Maybe my team is. I would never characterize myself as the smartest guy. But the way I look at it is, if you look at history, right, and this goes to even my example with Self-Tron and then transitioning into different verticals. I mean, the consumer guys had figured this out ages ago in terms of how to bring innovative technology. And if I look at who our standards and what we look to for inspiration, I mean, folks like Mark Benioff of Salesforce, what he did to CRM, a decade ago, and the new recent upstarts like Aaron Levy of Docs.net, I mean, they're paving the way. And, for us, we could just sit back and see how a lot of the processes that they're putting in place, we could apply to healthcare, and it makes our job easier. Now, that being said, healthcare is different. There are clearly a lot of regulatory constraints, overhead associated with CFR Part 11 compliance that we have to address, but for the most part, a lot of this stuff has been figured out by folks a lot smarter than me, and we're just kind of following the same patterns.
Yeah. So, is this currently being used right now, or is it still in testing mode, or?
Yeah. So we released it back in June, and it's being used by a wide variety of CROs, obviously site sponsors, biotech companies.
So let's say we would get a new study here, and they happen to be using goBalto's tracker service. Would I log on to goBalto.com, or how does that work?
So basically, there's a 3-step process, right? Sponsors, they get set up with an account, and for us, we configure their workflows, because every workflow is different by region, and certain sponsors have their own SOPs. That takes about a couple hours. They add their sites to the study, and an invitation gets out to all the sites. You get a link, you click on it, you're in the study. So I'll give you a great example. There was an RFI that was being put out, and they asked us, one question was, how long does it take to get the system configured? And their typical response is 6 months. Us, we answered 2 hours, and they came back with a very quizzical response saying, is this for true? That's the power of SaaS, software as a service on the web, where it's really trying to simplify the entire overall onboard experience. So to your question, it's basically you get a link, you click on it, you get your own tracker account, and you're in the study, and you're up and running.
So Don does a lot of the startup stuff here. And Don, what do you typically do? You print out the documents and?
First thing we might get is a disclosure form or agreement. We start with that first, and they'll send in the feasibility, to see exactly what our PI can do and can't do, and what material and stuff we have here available to support the study. If everybody's agreeable to that, then they send in the final contract agreements and the budgets, and then they start pumping in all the regulatory stuff after that.
Yeah.
So it's all
is that done primarily through email, Excel, fax, mail?
Through email, and through email.
Yeah, lots of email.
Yeah, and they have a tendency to duplicate it. For instance, I have one of my lead coordinators here, and I delegate a lot to him. I might put me down as the key contact, but if I put his name down, then they're sending the same thing to my coordinator, to my PI, and to myself. So we have to sit down and then says, okay, well, did you do this? Did you do this? You know, we have to compare notes to see who actually did that work, and to make sure we're not duplicating information, because
That's right.
You know, so it's a little cumbersome.
Yeah, so it's about minimizing duplicative efforts and waste. So there may be another time where you and I could set up a separate demo, show you what Tracker does. But at the end, what it basically is, you have this interface. It's a dashboard that shows all the steps that your site would go through in study startup, and the sponsor would have their own view of this dashboard of all the steps. And as you complete tasks, and as sponsors complete tasks, they get checked off in markups. So you guys are, first off, always on the same page. The other thing is, as you collect documents into the system, they can be repurposed for other studies. So you're not constantly re-updating, re-inputting the same information for different sponsors as well. Another thing is the audit trail, right? So a lot of feedback we've heard is around people getting dinged because they lose documents and licenses are outdated, right? So the system has been designed to make sure that everything stays up to date. You guys are on the same page in real time. And this really plays well, particularly if you have a site that's doing a lot of studies around, with multiple sponsors, to have one portal that you can log into every day and just check and see exactly where you are in the status and what's in your camp versus the sponsor's camp. That's what Tracker's been designed to. So it is a lot about trying to make sites' lives easier.
So if you're a site, you can actually use this even though your sponsors are not using this.
No, the way it's designed right now is that you would have to interface with a sponsor.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the value here is because of that interaction with the sponsor, like you know exactly how that study is going along.
You can still try Tracker for free and poke around. If you like what you see, come back later. Okay, yeah, we're seeing that 14 days for free. So have you been getting a lot of interest?
Yes. Yeah. So whether it's global CROs, global pharma, small biotech, the system has been designed to be flexible enough to accommodate small, phase 1-2 studies with a single small biotech company versus say a global CRO. They're doing 400 studies a year. It's just extremely modular, and that really is the power of SaaS.
Yeah, and I have no doubt this works, but you know how this industry is. I mean, I can imagine you've already gotten some pushback from some key employees at different sponsors. They always complain when they need a change. I mean, we've seen it when, they have the ECRFs and they switch from the paper CRFs. It's clearly much better, but people just complain. They say, right. Oh, man, now I have to do this and that.
Other system, yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand how to log on to the Internet Explorer, and I need 7.0 instead of 5. Whatever. I mean, right. Are you getting any kind of feedback along those lines?
Yeah, again, the way I look at this is, so there's this technology adoption life cycle that every new technology goes through. It's a bell-shaped curve. Yeah. And typically you have these early adopters and innovators that always come on board early. And we had those about a year ago. We're now entering to the spot where now a lot of the early majority in this curve, like some of the largest CROs are starting to see the benefit. Because at the end of the day, what do sponsors and particularly CROs and sponsors care for, right? It's all about time, speed, efficiency.
Yeah, if you can, about survival.
Yeah, exactly. Survival now, right? Particularly with all the consolidation taking place, right? It's a relatively tough margin business, and CROs are doing everything they can to really optimize their processes. So if you can empirically show these folks that you are through this system, right, using this actual data, that they can improve the productivity of their FTEs and accelerate their timelines. Particularly for the key decision makers and upper management, this is pretty much an obvious equation. Right? For the lower folks, the way you address at least the onboarding is, yes, they don't want to use another system. Right? There are ways to actually get around that because, as particularly Don, who likes to use email, we're actually thinking of ways where sites may even never have to log on to Tracker. They can interface to Tracker using their native email application. Right? So these are, again, things that a lot of the consumer tech companies have figured out. But to the extent that you make the GUI really user-friendly and intuitive, and everybody throws these terms around very casual. Everybody's intuitive, right? Nobody's ever going to claim their interface is intuitive, right? But if you can categorically just show these end users and let them tell their customers and their colleagues how great the platform is. That's where the viral component comes in.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you how great our system is. I do think our system is great. I think it's the best out there. But I want our end users to actually fall in love with it and get addicted to it so that they're going to tell their colleagues. And that's where the power of the network effect and the true, you know, I think its capability of the system starts resonating when it's not the vendor telling you how awesome it is. It's the industry. And eventually we get there, right? I mean, again, we released the system in June and we've gotten some significant traction. And I got to tell you, I'll be honest, there's still things we got to work out. It's not perfect, right? There's still, you know, features that folks are asked for. There are things that can be optimized that we have to improve, and we're nowhere near the ideal solution. But I'll tell you one thing, at least from the feedback we're getting from the users, is that they absolutely love it and they think it's better than anything that they've ever seen. And these are them, right? So for folks that do typically come on board as new users, we always provide them referrals, let them just speak to the customers, let them be honest, the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of what people like and what they don't like. And this is all about that spirit of transparency that resonates in all the valleys of goBalto.
Wow.
Very good. Now, let's talk a little bit about your blog, Chromosome.
Chromosome, yeah.
When did you start that thing? Was it it's called Chromosome.
Yeah, the Chromosome. So that was about a little over 2 years ago. Was our inaugural post, and you know it's really a platform to allow a lot of the industry gurus like yourself provide their perspectives directly from their mouths in terms of what they're seeing in the clinical research industry. And start off with a fairly small audience, but now it's reached through our newsletter and the blog.
Now, do we just lose him?
Localize their honest opinion versus trying to sugarcoat some of the issues that people do see. Kind of trying to keep it honest and real like you guys.
Yeah, and I've written a few blog posts on that now, and it's been getting a good amount of users on there. Are you seeing that the same people reading your blog end up being your customers, or was that the intention?
We've gotten quite a few conversions through the blog, yes.
Okay. Yeah, we see it right here. You guys changed it up a little bit. The design is always top notch.
Thank you. Yeah, we got a great design team. We actually reskinned the website.
Every time I look at your website, something's different.
Is it? It was just about 7 months ago.
Last book read, Enchanted, Guy Kawasaki. Now, is that really the last book you read, or?
No, I've been reading a couple other books since then. That was a while ago.
List. I love your Amazon reading list. What book are you reading right now?
So there's one book called Business Model Game Changers, which really allows companies to think through in a very iterative manner to think through some of the business model issues. That's one book I'm reading, and I'm a big fan of obviously science fiction. If you know my reading list, and I've been reading a new book by Werner Vinge, as well as a popular reader in the sci-fi. So in between goBalto, the Rock Health thing, and my 3 children, the reading has slowed down just a little bit. I'm coming down to a book a month these days, but I really love it.
Very good. Everyone go check out the blog. We're going to have links if you want to see Jay's reading list. Add him as a connection on LinkedIn. You'll see it there. And now, Jay, where do you see your company like 5 years from now?
Yeah, again, so as I alluded to earlier, I think particularly the entire clinical research landscape is ripe for quite a bit of optimization and disruption, right? There's tremendous waste, and I think we touched on this earlier on some of the double entry, data entry that's being taken place, not only in study startup, but through the entire value chain. So our vision and, something that Apple has done to great success is modularizing a lot of these e-clinical components, right? So I can envision a future where not only is there tracker for study startup, there may be tracker for study conduct. And a lot of folks are transitioning to this electronic trial master file is an area that we're also exploring as well. So it's just providing a whole suite of really user-friendly, intuitive solutions that touch on numerous points in the clinical research workflow. So our vision is to be the standard for e-clinical. That is the end game.
Yeah, what I would like to see, you guys have a great product, but what I would like to see, which the sponsors would never do, because they don't care about the sites.
I care. I care, Dan.
You care. We want to be able to track their payments to us in real time. We want to know if that check is
I got
sitting.
that feedback. I've got a lot of that feedback.
Yeah,
you can
we
tell that
wanna
to
know,
Lucy as well. Speak to her.
We want to know what basement that check is sitting in India somewhere, and we want to know why it's not in our mailbox.
India. Wow. I wonder
They
why
come
it's being
from
routed.
India, man,
Yeah.
and they use that excuse.
And it seems to be the quiet rule among the sponsors is that we get to sponsor the studies before we get any money.
Oh yeah,
from them.
we finance Pharma's research. Well, everyone knows that.
Well,
Everybody.
I got a
knows
question
that.
to you guys. I mean, this new, relatively new regulation requiring the physicians to disclose the payment schemes. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the Sunshine Act.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen any big difference. I'm okay with it. I haven't seen any kind of impact on what we do. The physicians don't seem to bat, at least the ones, our docs don't seem to bat an eye about it.
No, the only problem is that you get these people from the general public. I guess these activists, and some of them are against medicine, and they like to point fingers and say, "This doctor, look how much he made in that study. He made millions of dollars." That's the gross number. That's not what that doctor takes home. You know, he's got to pay everybody first, and so he's probably taking home 1% of that. But so I think it leads to some finger pointing from the public. But all in all, I think it's good. I mean, you want to know how much a doctor is getting paid by a pharmaceutical company for speaking.
Right.
As far as research, I've given this opinion on the blog before. I think they're using it as an excuse to drive costs down. It's now a negotiating chip. I asked for an increase in a budget recently, and they said, well, because of the Sunshine Act, we can't go over this amount. And so...
Yeah, but after, we spoke with the gentleman that's an FDA attorney, and he actually explained how to get around that. And we have to point out to them that just like if this was any other product in any other industry, and if you go past that net period of time that you agreed to, then there is some sort of interest compensation that's in the play. And we should still be able to take that route, that if we agree to a net 30, we should be paid net 30, not net 90.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, for those of you watching, check that interview out with FDA lawyers. Fantastic interview.
So, but I haven't, most of the doctors, and when you're doing regulatory stuff, you end up a lot of times filling the stuff out, and you go to your doctor and says, okay, read this, and your doctor reads it and says, okay, and they sign it. But I don't think they really pay too much attention, because most of the docs we deal with, they don't get paid for speaking. Nothing really changes for them. A lot of the sites that I've worked for some of the largest sites here in Southern California, and most of the doctors were paid by the hour anyway by the company itself. They're basically on contract, and it's a fee for service.
Right.
So, and it's usually something that's customary and reasonable.
Yeah. But no need to get into that, Jay. I
understand
that's
You're gonna get the hairs up on the back of Dan's neck.
I'm starting to feel it right now.
if I was your investor, I would tell you not to do that, because no sponsor would even listen to you.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay, and us sites wouldn't be able to pay you.
Well, sites don't get charged in our system, so it's free for
Very
you.
good. Yes, I'm curious now. I want to do a study startup just to see if they're using goBalto.
Yeah.
Sure, there's probably a few sponsors you may be working with that.
I've actually seen the name. But,
You have?
Yeah. But I can't remember where, because it was driving me crazy.
From a study.
I'm not sure if you guys have sent me an email or if it was from a study.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty new, but we'll see. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of it.
Yeah, definitely. I like what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite innovative.
Thank you, Jay.
It keeps everything right out in front of you, and I like that too, because that's actually the only way you succeed. You have, whenever you're trying to succeed at anything, if you're not dealing with the realities that are in front of you, then you're somewhere down the line going to run into some problems.
Yeah.
Some serious problems.
But with Jay's track record, I mean, you're extremely successful. So the next startup you do, I want to be an investor, okay?
Next startup I do is going to be raising my 3 kids. I think I made a pact with my wife.
I want to take you to Vegas.
For a while.
You seem to have that touch, so I want to take you to Vegas.
Trust me, I got to keep my success record at least for now. I'm not going to Vegas.
Right. No, Jay needs to do the startups. That's yeah. Well, we'll definitely keep in touch, Jay, and thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you a lot, Jay. It's a pleasure talking to you.
This was really a lot of fun, and again, I got to give a shout out to what you guys are doing and to the transparency you're bringing, and I love it. I learned a lot from your blog actually, around trial recruitment and participation. So keep up the phenomenal work. I mean, you guys are doing awesome.
Thank you. And
Thank
you.
you.
Same.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. We need those revenues to follow.
Okay, sounds great, guys.
Thank you, Jay. Jay
All right, Jay.
from goBalto.com. Thanks a lot.
All right.